Hey, physics class. So the problem that I gave for homework has a bit of tricky trigonometry in it, and I want to make sure that I can solve that part of it for you, just in case that is what is keeping you from doing this problem. If I'm giving you a physics problem, I don't want the math to be what's tripping you up. So if I could just sketch this out, we've got object A, object B, separated by 25 meters, and there are two angles. This one is 55. This one is 60. I make no pretense to be able to draw angles properly. You'll just have to go with the numbers. Now, in order to solve this problem, you're going to need to know these two distances. And I intended that you'd be able to use trigonometry to solve this triangle. However, don't know to what extent I can take your ability to do that for granted, so I'll do it for you right now. These two angles are going to have to add up to 180 with this one. 60 plus 55, the last remaining number is 65. These three numbers add up to 180, so this is a complete triangle. Now we can use something called the law of sines. And the law of sines works like this. If you take the sine of an angle and you divide it by the length of the opposite side, you should get something which is equal to, if you divided the sine of a different angle by the length of its opposite side. Basically, the sine of 65 divided by 25 should be equal to the sine of 55 divided by however long that is. So let me start this over. The sine of 65 over 25, again, they go together because this angle is opposite that side, should be equal to the sine of 55 times the distance that object B went. I think a nice label for that would be x sub B, distance that B went. And that should also be equal to the sine of 60 divided by that distance, which should be the distance that A went. And I think, again, XA would be a fine label for that. So to solve for these is just going to take some algebra and trigonometry. Let's go ahead and find that distance first. So if the sine of 65 over 25 is equal to the sine of 55 over x sub b, multiply both sides by xb. That cancels. Multiply both sides by 25. Oh, that's barely in the frame. They cancel. And then divide both sides by sine of 65. They cancel. What you are left with is xb, everything else is canceled, equals sine 55 over sine 65 times 25. That's going to be equal to 0.819 over 0.906 times 25 819 divided by 0.906 equals times 25, 22.6. That's the distance that B traveled. It's 22.6. As for this, the math is going to be very similar to that one. It's just instead of sine of 55, I should have the sine of 60. So, I mean, I could work it out step by step, but I mean, this is just algebra. I think that you could probably work that out for yourself if you needed to. Starting out with the sine of 65 over 25 equaling sine of 60 over the distance that A traveled. The distance that A traveled is going to be 25 times the sine of 60 over the sine of 65. If you work that out, $23.9. That means that the distance that A traveled is 23.9 meters. All of this clutter was just to get those numbers. So this is the slightly de-trigonometrified problem. And if I'm not mistaken, the problem says that A is accelerating at 1.2 meters per second squared, and B is going to move at a constant velocity. I'm asking for which constant velocity will cause that collision.